Hi. I really wanted to have another chat like the one I did earlier this winter. But now I decided to do it in English. And I wanted to talk about vegetarianism. And um, recently, there were 3 years since I became a vegetarian. And so I wanted to share my experience of it. And I suppose what I thought was most remarkable when I decided to do this change was how many people, I think, just decided that now that I was a vegetarian, then my diet was everybody's business, and um, continuously wanted to criticize it, and then I'm not referring to. There were also a lot of people who were genuinely interested and wanted to. They were asking why I decided it and what has changed and so on. Well, there were a good sum of people who, aggressively criticized it. And I think it's quite clear that, like so often when people behave that way, that they don't exactly know what they're talking about. So I wanted to explain why people in increasing numbers are becoming vegetarians these days. Um, but when people are asking me, I was never bold enough to ask in return why they ate meat. But I have seen a discussion quite often on social media where people are, waiting in with their opinions on the matter, and the almost only thing that I see from people with meat is that they just say, I just eat meat, it's my private business, and and it's just their private business. And then quite not as often, but quite often it's also added uh, that uh, that people have been eating meat for centuries and centuries, and then all of a sudden some people started to live off a plant-based diet, or at least a diet without meat in it, and they just completely had it of vegetarians telling them what they can or cannot eat, which I at least thought was quite interesting because my experience was absolutely reversed. Um, but to begin with the latter argument that people have been eating meat for centuries and centuries. Well, first of all, I think there are very few things that we do like we used to do. Um, and yes, we did eat meat out of necessity back in the days, but now we get our or we get most of our food from the grocery store, and there we can buy all the food with all the nutrition we need without having to consume meat. And besides, over the last 50 years, meat consumption per person has more than doubled. So it has been a long time since we ate meat out of necessity. So those arguments don't exactly hold up. But to the main argument, the one I continuously see, that eating meat is simply people's private business. Um, to anyone who believes that, I am very sorry to inform you that it is far from being your private business. I think the most obvious second partner is the animal itself. Animal cruelty is something that people are starting to be more and more aware of. We know that the condition these animals live with are completely unacceptable. Um, and I think the next factor whose business it is also is the mother of those animals. Because these animals, they aren't stupid. The female animals, they carry their babies, and they give birth to them, and they know very well what's going on. They know that there are humans who are taking their offsprings, And I saw a very interesting video from about this farm in Australia. I don't remember the name, but it's a sanctuary farm, and they are saving animals from dairy farms. And the video was about a cow, and she had just come to the farm. And after some time, the people, they realized, there was something going on, as in she was hiding something, and they assumed she had probably given birth to a calf, and turns out they were right. But the cow, she was hiding the cow for them because, of course, she assumed that these humans would take her offspring, just like the humans had taken all of her other offsprings. So she managed to hide it well in high grass, and took the farmers quite a while to finally find the calf. And when the cow saw that, she simply took her baby to another hiding spot, and she changed hiding spot every single day because she was so afraid that the humans would take her baby. And I thought that showed quite well that these animals know very well what's going on. But whose business is it else? Turns out that livestock uses 30% of the Earth's entire land surface, and some 70% of former forests in the Amazon have been turned over to grazing. That is uh, yeah, to harvest for animal feeding. And the World Hunger Program at Brown University, they researched this, and they calculated that recent world harvest, if equally distributed with no diversion of grain-feeding livestock, could provide a vegetarian diet to 6 billion people, which is almost our Earth's population. Whereas a meat-rich diet, like that of people in the wealthy nations, could support only 2.6 billion. And to explain this a bit better, 60 pounds of grain is needed to make 1 pound of meat. So there is so much energy that is lost in this process, and I think we all know that we live in a world where starvation is a massive problem, and on top of that, the world's population is increasing. So I think it is quite obvious that we simply can't afford this middle factor. We can't afford losing all this energy, in this middle animal, just, I don't know, just so people can have a better meal. And another massive factor, greenhouse effect. That is something we are all familiar with. And according to the United Nations, the livestock sector accounts for 9% of CO2 deriving from human-related activities. But it produces a much larger share of even more harmful greenhouse gas. It generates 65% of human-related nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide has 296 times the global warming potential that of CO2. And the global livestock industry produces more greenhouse gas emissions than all cars, planes, trains, and ships combined. But a worldwide survey by Ipsos MORI, they did a research, and turns out that twice as many people think transport is the bigger contributor to global warming, which actually is a rational thing, because I think that's what we hear so much more about. But it's not what our scientists say. And meat consumption is on track, according to the United Nations, is on track to rise 75% by 2050, and dairy is 65%. So it is an easy math equation that this is not going to work for a much longer time. Um, but I hope I have made it clear that this is all about quantity. So, uh, and we need to reduce the meat we are consuming. That is very obvious. But uh, yeah, basically all reducing in meat consumption is off the batter. Even though it would only be one meat-free day in the week, or I don't know, people would decide to have the meat more as a side dish than the main part of the meal, or basically whatever to reduce the meat consumption, because it's obvious that we need to do something. So, if I said something here that you weren't aware before, I sincerely hope you will give it some thought. Perhaps look it up. Um, but if you already knew all of this and still are not interested in reducing your meat consumption, at least try not to lash out at a person who is simply trying, or no, not even trying, who is making the world a slightly better place. So thank you very much for listening to this.